For centuries, communities across the globe have organized, marched, and revolted to secure their freedom. We have overthrown empires and dismantled apartheid states. Yet true liberation, a society free from systemic subjugation, continues to slip through our fingers. The machinery of control simply adapts. To navigate this fight, we rely on specific blueprints. We inherit frameworks that promise to guide us out of oppression, mapping the terrain of our struggle into understandable categories. This diagram maps out the three dominant paths of resistance we typically rely on. Marxism targets economic exploitation. Feminism dismantles patriarchal hierarchies. Afrocentrism directly confronts the brutality of racial domination. Each blueprint captures a genuine piece of the problem, but they hit hard limits. By reducing the human experience primarily to material conditions and the seizure of production, the Marxist approach targets the economic symptoms while leaving the psychological structures of control untouched. Afrocentrism faces a similar trap. When we define the struggle primarily along lines of skin color, we organize ourselves inside the exact racial categories invented by those who engineered our subjugation. We are essentially accepting the boundaries drawn by the oppressor. These inherited frameworks operate in reaction to the system. They seek parity, integration, or a reversal of power within the existing social hierarchy, rather than dismantling the underlying logic that makes the hierarchy possible. Attempting to dismantle a machine using the blueprints provided by its engineers ensures the machine survives. When we fight the symptoms of oppression using the paradigms that created them, we trap our movements in an unwinnable, permanent cycle. When movements divide their focus, treating race, class, and gender as entirely separate battlefields, our collective resistance shatters into isolated factions. This isolation is a feature of the systems we resist. A splintered opposition allows a small ruling elite to manage large populations, pitting overlapping interests against one another to ensure the overarching structure remains secure. We are confronting a singular, highly adaptable system that presents itself through multiple faces. These faces appear as discrete modern phenomena: the machine of global capitalism, the theater of liberal democracy, and digital frontiers like AI. These technological giants act as the system's nervous system, harvesting human attention and data to fuel the same profit-driven body that drives economic extraction. They are different appendages of the same central organism. Activists often dedicate their entire lives to fighting just one of these faces. We mistake a localized policy win or a corporate concession for systemic change, unaware that the system can afford to lose a single battle to pacify the opposition. While the oppressed argue over which cause deserves priority, the central architecture of control quietly continues to extract wealth and commodify human life without interruption. To defeat an entity that survives by keeping its opponents fractured, we must stop reacting to the physical manifestations of its power and identify the invisible logic driving them. Breaking this reactive cycle requires us to redefine the nature of the struggle. We have to identify what oppression actually is at its absolute root. The most effective systems of subjugation do not rely primarily on military force. They sustain themselves by distorting reality, quietly manipulating how individuals and societies perceive their own existence. Capturing a population's imagination and worldview is the prerequisite for physical control. The colonization of the mind precedes and secures the colonization of the body. 2,000 years ago, the ancient Messianic movement organized under the weight of the Greco-Roman Empire, an occupying force that relied on a small class of political elites to manage their own people, much like the neo-colonial structures we see today. In response to this imperial power, figures like Yeshua connected liberation directly to perception, stating, "You shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free." If achieving freedom strictly requires understanding the truth, then the core mechanism holding the empire together is deception. The empire ruled by forcing people to mistake falsehood for reality. True oppression is an existential problem that warps human perception and severs our connection to the natural order. This makes the struggle for liberation an ideological conflict, a war to reclaim how we see the world. The scholar and leader H.E. Ben-Ami recognized this, framing the true oppressor not as a specific race or nation, but as an ungodly worldview. He identified this force as the abusive Western idea. This idea is built on several core pillars: liberal democracy as a cultural lifestyle, the relentless extraction of capitalism, extreme individualism, and a scientific rationalism stripped of moral boundaries. These paradigms operate as a Trojan horse. They are exported globally and marketed as the absolute pinnacle of human development, while functioning as socio-political vehicles for global control. Ben-Ami summarized this conflict with the thesis, "Spiritual warfare is a war of ideas." In this context, spiritual refers to the intellect, the mindset, and the orientation of reality that governs human behavior. Ideas form the bedrock of our lived experience. They dictate what a society values, how it organizes its communities, and what metrics it uses to define achievement. When we view history through this lens, white supremacy is revealed as a deliberately constructed tool. It was an ideology engineered to mobilize European populations, weaponizing them to enforce a system of global greed and extraction. Fighting racism by focusing solely on flesh and blood means fighting the system's foot soldiers. True liberation requires destroying the ideology that commands them. Acknowledging this reality explains why organizing resistance exclusively along racial lines has historically led to internal betrayal. The Western idea is highly contagious. It does not respect geographical borders, and it has successfully assimilated individuals of every race and skin tone into its logic. Global control systems actively elevate local political and business elites who look exactly like the oppressed population, but share the mindset and greed of the oppressor. Expecting these leaders to act in the collective interest simply because they share a skin color is a severe misunderstanding of human behavior. Worldview and character dictate actions, not melanin. The modern enemy can only be identified by their ideology and the tangible results of their actions, their fruits. Effective resistance requires us to forge unity based entirely on shared purpose and clear perception. We are witnessing the ultimate ideological clash. Two entirely different operating systems for human reality are currently competing for the future of the planet. This diagram visualizes the underlying logic of the Western idea, epitomized by capitalism. This system demands relentless competition and requires individuals to prioritize personal accumulation above all else. It measures human worth purely by economic output. The harvest of this operating system is visible in declining birth rates, environmental collapse, and the destruction of the family unit. The pursuit of endless growth depletes the foundation of life itself. On the other side is an ancient alternative, the African Edenic principle of collective life, best recognized today as Ubuntu. Ubuntu represents a foundational recognition of biological and social interconnectedness. It operates on the philosophy of "I am because you are," where the survival of the individual relies entirely on the health of the whole. Under this architecture, indigenous philosophies strictly regulated greed, treating extreme self-interest as a spiritual disorder that directly threatens the survival of the collective. Capitalism structures society in opposition to the conditions required for life to thrive. Ubuntu aligns human behavior with the natural laws of balance and continuous regeneration. We cannot overcome a deceptive system by thinking within its established boundaries. Reclaiming our future requires us to stop giving our energy and consent to a system designed for our collective depletion. We must embrace the African idea, not as a restricted geographical trait, but as a primal, nature-aligned consciousness. It is an alternative operating system available to all of humanity. Adopting this idea demands a departure from individualism and a return to relational responsibility and reverence for the systems that actually sustain life. Victory consists of rendering the master's ideology completely obsolete by adopting a superior consciousness. Liberation is not about becoming the new master of an abusive hierarchy. The struggle for freedom has always been a war for the mind. Only by identifying the true enemy, the abusive Western idea, can humanity finally chart a successful path to enduring liberation.